My mom didn't raise her voice that night. She didn't need to. She just took my hand, slid the ring off my finger, and held it up under the light like she was inspecting something she had every right to judge. Then she smiled. "Is this really what he gave you?" Not loud, not dramatic, just loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. A couple of people looked down at their plates. Someone gave that awkward little laugh people use when they don't want to get involved. And I didn't say anything. Not because I was embarrassed, but because while she was turning the ring in her hand, I saw something inside it. A tiny engraving. So small I had to look twice. It said, "For what you gave up." And under it, just one letter. M. Not his name. Not his initials. And in that moment, I stopped hearing my mother completely. Because suddenly, this ring had a story I had never been told. The strange part is, I didn't think, why would she say that? She had always been capable of saying things like that. What I thought was, why does this feel familiar? My name is Sienna Blake. I'm 29 years old. And what happened after that dinner changed the way I saw my mother, my fiancé, and even that ring. The dinner was supposed to be simple, a small celebration. There were candles on the table. My mother had used the good plates. Even the napkins were folded the way she folds them when she wants the evening to look expensive. Family, close people, nothing dramatic, just an announcement, a moment. And for once, I thought it would be different. That this time, it wouldn't turn into comparison, or judgment, or quiet tension disguised as conversation, because engagements are supposed to bring people together, not expose them. From the moment we sat down, my mother's attention stayed on me, not in a warm way, in a measured way, like she was observing something, evaluating, waiting. She wasn't listening to the conversation. She was watching for the moment she could take control of it. And I've known her long enough to recognize that look. It never comes without a reason, and it never ends quietly. I didn't show the ring immediately, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew how she was. Details mattered to her. Price, appearance, impression, and anything that didn't meet her expectations became a topic. Not privately, publicly. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. "So, where's the ring?" She didn't wait long. Of course she didn't. Because moments like this, she controls. Not loudly, but precisely. And the table shifted slightly. Attention moved. Because now, this wasn't just dinner anymore. It was a moment. I didn't make it dramatic. Didn't present it. Didn't build it up. I just placed my hand on the table, quietly, letting the ring catch the light naturally. And for a second, no one said anything. Because it wasn't flashy. It wasn't oversized. It was simple, intentional. And to me, it meant everything. She reached for my hand, slowly, carefully, then removed the ring, like it belonged to her before it ever belonged to me. Like it was hers to examine, not mine to wear, and held it under the light, turning it slightly, inspecting it. And in that moment, I already knew what was coming, because I've seen that expression before. Then she laughed, soft at first, then clearer. "This is what he chose? This is what he could afford?" My aunt looked down at her water glass. My fiancé stayed still. No one wanted to be the first person to interrupt her. That was the room's way of handling her. Not agreement, not support, just silence. No one said, "That's not appropriate." No one corrected her. No one shifted the conversation. Because in rooms like that, people don't challenge the loudest voice. They adjust around it. And I didn't speak either. But not for the same reason. Because while she was still talking, turning the ring slowly under the light, I saw something. Not on the outside. Inside the band. Something small. So easy to miss that I almost did. At first I thought it was just a reflection, but then I looked again. And this time, I saw it clearly. An engraving. Deliberate. Carefully placed. Not random. And in that moment, everything else faded. Her voice, the table, the reactions, all of it. Because once I noticed it, I couldn't focus on anything else. For what you gave up. And beneath it, M, just one letter. Not my fiancé's name, not his initials, not anything that made sense to me. And just like that, the whole dinner stopped being about embarrassment. It became a question. I barely slept that night. Not because of what she said, because of what I saw. That engraving didn't belong to the story I knew. When he gave me the ring, there was no mention of customization, no hidden meaning, no emotional speech about sacrifice. It was simple, quiet, real. That's what made it special. So seeing those words now felt like discovering a second version of something I thought I already understood. And that's what unsettled me. Not the ring itself. The possibility. That part of its story wasn't mine. I could have said something right there. Stopped her. Corrected her. Shifted the attention. But I didn't. Because this wasn't a moment to defend. It was a moment to observe. Because when something doesn't make sense, reacting too early closes doors. And I needed those doors open. So I stayed quiet. Let her speak. Let the room settle into its assumptions. Because I knew something they didn't. This wasn't over. Not even close. And then it came back. Not suddenly, not clearly, but slowly, like a memory finding its way forward. A conversation. Months ago. My mother asking me something casual. What kind of rings do you like? At the time, it felt normal, curious, almost supportive, which was unusual for her, but I didn't question it, because sometimes you want to believe the best version of someone. I remember answering without hesitation. Simple, I said. Nothing flashy. Something meaningful. I even described small details. The shape, the style, the kind of design that felt like me, and she listened. Carefully. More carefully than she usually did. And now, thinking back, that detail felt different. Too intentional. At the time, I thought she was just making conversation, but now, I remembered how specific her questions were. What size stone? What kind of band? Engraving or no engraving? And I had laughed. Said I didn't care about cost. Didn't need anything big. Just something thoughtful. And she nodded. Like she was taking mental notes. Not as a mother, but like someone collecting information. At the time, it felt like interest. Looking back, it felt like research. Because here's what didn't make sense. My fiancé bought the ring weeks after that conversation. He showed me receipts, talked about the process, told me where he got it, and everything aligned. Everything made sense. Until now. Until that engraving. Because that engraving wasn't part of his story. Back at the table, I looked at my mother again. But this time, not as someone criticizing, as someone involved. Because suddenly, her reaction felt off. Not just judgmental, but disconnected. Like she didn't recognize something. Or worse, like she was pretending not to. She kept speaking, confident, certain. Like she fully believed what she was saying, like the ring had nothing to do with her, like she was just another observer. And that confidence felt unnatural now, because if she knew, she wouldn't sound like that. And if she didn't know, then something else was wrong. By the time dinner ended, I wasn't thinking about the embarrassment anymore. I wasn't replaying her words. or the way people reacted. I was focused on one thing: the truth. Because something about this situation was layered, and I had only seen the surface. That night, I made a decision. Not emotional, not reactive, precise. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I wasn't going to ask questions without answers. I was going to verify. Because assumptions don't expose truth. Evidence does. And the next day, I went to the jeweler. The next morning, I didn't call anyone, didn't ask questions, didn't even tell my fiancé where I was going. Because this wasn't something I could explain yet. This was something I needed to understand first. So I drove to the jeweler, the same one he had told me about, the same one he said he trusted. And when I walked in, everything looked normal, calm, professional, unremarkable, which somehow made it feel even more serious. Because if something was hidden here, it was hidden well. I didn't explain the whole story, didn't bring emotion into it. I just placed the ring on the counter and said, "Can you check the order file for this?" That's it. No accusations, no assumptions, just a request. And the man behind the counter nodded, like it was routine, like this was something he had done before. But the moment he picked up the ring, his expression changed slightly. Not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. He turned to his computer, typed slowly, carefully, not rushed, not distracted. And those few seconds felt longer than they should have. Because when you're waiting for confirmation, time stretches. Every small movement matters. Every pause feels intentional. And I stood there, watching him, trying to read something before he said it out loud. Then he said something simple. "This is a custom piece." And that alone shifted everything. Because that wasn't part of the story I was told. Not fully. Not like this. Custom means intention, planning, specific choices. And suddenly, this ring wasn't just a purchase. It was designed. He clicked again, then said, "There are 2 versions in the file." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He looked at the screen. An original request and a later modification. I pointed to the inside of the ring. That engraving. Who requested it? And for the first time, he didn't answer immediately. He looked at the ring again, then back at the screen, then at me. Like he was deciding how much to say. Not hiding, but choosing his words carefully, which told me one thing clearly. There was something to say. He turned the screen slightly toward himself, scrolled, clicked, and then stopped. "There's a name on the order." And my chest tightened. Not from fear, from confirmation. Because now, this wasn't a possibility anymore. It was about to become fact. I looked at him and said, "That's not his name, is it?" He shook his head. "There are 2 names attached to it," he said. "One person placed the original request, the other approved the final design changes." That was the moment everything stopped feeling accidental. Because now, someone else wasn't just connected to the ring, they were built into it. "I need you to tell me exactly who placed it." My voice didn't shake. He looked at the file one more time, then said, "The original order was placed by your mother." I didn't move. "And the final design changes were approved by your fiancé." That's when everything finally made sense. She had chosen the version she wanted, the version that looked right to her, the version that fit her standards, the version that felt like something she could approve of. And he had changed it, quietly, deliberately, without telling her, not to deceive me, to protect what the ring was supposed to mean. So no, this wasn't just a ring she didn't approve of. It was worse than that. It was a ring she had tried to control, and failed to. She wasn't mocking something cheap. She was mocking the one version of the ring she didn't get to control. And that made her laugh make sense in a way I almost wished it didn't. When he said it, I didn't respond. Not right away. Because reactions belong to emotion, and this moment needed clarity. So I just stood there, looking at the ring. Not the design, not the size, but the meaning behind it. Because now, this wasn't a symbol of a proposal, it was evidence. And that changed everything. Before I left, I asked one final question. Was this paid in full? Simple, direct, and important. Because intention is one thing, but commitment shows up in action. And he nodded. Yes, paid completely. No hesitation, no doubt. Which meant this wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't assistance. It wasn't help. It was a decision she had already made without me. He printed the file, order details, payment confirmation, name, date, everything documented. And when I held that paper, it didn't feel like proof. It felt like clarity. Because now, there was no confusion left, no missing piece, no assumption, just truth. And truth doesn't need explanation. On the drive back, everything replayed, but differently. Because now I wasn't seeing her words as random. I was seeing them as intentional. She didn't just mock the ring. She created the situation, then judged it publicly. Which meant this wasn't about disapproval. It was about control, about shaping the narrative, and then standing above it. On the drive back, everything replayed, but differently. Because now I wasn't seeing her words as random. I was seeing them as intentional. She didn't just mock the ring. She created the situation, then judged it publicly. Which meant this wasn't about disapproval. It was about control, about shaping the narrative, and then standing above it. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had changed. Same tone, same conversations, same presence. Because when people think everything is normal, they stay comfortable. And comfort creates space. Space to move, space to act, space to reveal. My mother didn't bring up the dinner again. Not directly, but her attitude stayed the same. Confident, certain, like nothing had shifted. Like her version of that moment was still the truth. And that told me something important. She didn't think she would be questioned. I didn't want a private argument. She had chosen a public moment the first time, so I chose one too. Not for drama, for clarity, because some truths land harder when everyone in the room has to sit still and hear them. A week later, there was another dinner. Family again. Same people. Same environment. And when I received the invitation, I didn't hesitate, because I knew this wasn't just another dinner. This was timing. And I was ready. That night, I didn't prepare a speech, didn't plan an argument. I brought one thing: the document. Folded, simple, clear. Because I didn't need emotion. I didn't need volume. I just needed truth. And when the moment came, I was going to let it speak. When I walked into the dinner, everything looked the same. Same table, same people, same energy. But I wasn't the same, because this time, I wasn't there to participate. I was there to close something. And the moment I sat down, I could already feel it. That subtle attention. The same quiet observation. The same expectation. Like they were waiting for something to unfold. They just didn't know what kind of moment it was going to be. It didn't take long. My mother glanced at my hand, then smiled. That same controlled smile. So, still wearing it? And a few people chuckled lightly. Not loudly, not boldly. Just enough to support the tone. like they were stepping back into the same role as before. Observers, not participants. And for a second, it almost felt like nothing had changed. But everything had. I didn't explain the ring, didn't justify it, didn't defend my fiancé, because this wasn't about proving its value anymore. That part of the story was already irrelevant. So instead, I reached into my bag, slowly, calmly, and placed the folded document on the table, right in front of her. At first, no one understood what it was, because it didn't look dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. Just a piece of paper. But silence began to spread. Because when someone changes the direction of a moment, people feel it, even before they understand it. And she looked down at it, slightly confused. I didn't raise my voice, didn't explain what it was. I just said, "You should read that." Simple, direct. And that sentence shifted the entire room. Because now, this wasn't her moment anymore. It was mine. And for the first time, she hesitated. She unfolded the paper, slowly, and as her eyes moved across the lines, something changed. Not instantly, but gradually. The confidence started to fade. The certainty started to weaken. Because this wasn't opinion. This wasn't interpretation. This was fact. Her eyes stopped, right at the name. Her name, printed clearly, attached to the order, the payment, the customization, everything. And for a second, she didn't move, didn't speak. Because some truths don't need explanation. They just need to be seen. People leaned slightly forward, not dramatically, but enough. Because now, they could feel the shift. They didn't know the full story yet, but they understood one thing. This wasn't what it looked like before, and the silence, this time, was different. I looked at her, calm, steady, and said, "You chose the version you wanted. He chose the one meant for me." Then I let the silence do the rest. No one laughed after that. No one defended her. No one rushed to soften it. Because for the first time, the room understood exactly what had happened. This was never about whether the ring was expensive enough. It was about who got to decide what my life should look like. And for the first time, it wasn't her. I picked up the ring, put it back on my finger, and walked out. Not angry, just clear. If you've ever stayed quiet long enough to let the truth speak for you, you probably know exactly what this felt like. Tell me honestly, would you have exposed it right there? Or walked away and never said a word?